first grade. I hope you had a nice spring break. And we're going to get back to work this week, starting off with our story, Clyde Monster. And we're also going to read one of Aesop's fables called Mice in Council. And Mice in Council is just a fancy way of saying the mice are having a meeting. So when you get to Mice in Council, we'll see what their meeting's about. Here are some words you might see in our story, Clyde Monster. I wanted to go over some of those words with you before we go through the story. The first two are generally. Remember, we talked about our base words and our endings. Our first two words have that ly ending, generally and usually. If something generally happens, that's what normally happens or what you would expect. And the same thing, if something usually happens, that's what happens. So most of the time we would say that usually we start our day off with the Pledge of Allegiance. And you can still do that at home. That would be a wonderful way to start your school day. Okay, we have another word that has a base word and an ending. We have excitement. And if there's a lot of excitement, it just means you're excited. Suggest. For suggest, I might give an idea. That might be an idea that I would suggest that you do something. If you're clumsy, you might trip easily or fall down easily. If you do that, you might be clumsy. Fierce. If something is fierce, it might be scary to you if something is fierce. Something that's fierce is also considered brave. Something's average, it's not great, it's not terrible, it's just in the middle, it's average. We have some words ugly and uglier. Supposed to. If you're supposed to do something, you know you should do it. Typical. If something's typical, it's what you generally or usually do. It's typical. Somersaults. I think you know what somersaults are. When you go down and you do a somersault or a forward roll on the ground, kind of flipping over but touching the ground. Somersaults. And exclaimed. If I exclaimed something, I said it usually in kind of an excited way. So let's go over these words one more time. Generally, usually, excitement, suggest, clumsy, fierce, average, ugly, uglier, supposed to, typical, somersaults, and exclaimed. All right, I'm going to stop the video here, and in just a minute I'll restart it, and I'll read to you the stories of Clyde Monster and Mice in Council. Hello from Celery, Strawberry, and Banana. I'll give you a minute to see our fish swimming around, and you can also see the molly that was swimming around in the tank next to Strawberry and Banana. And when you're looking, it sometimes might look like there are two strawberries or two bananas. That's because there's a reflection off the side of the tank. All right. So I'm going to read to you Clyde Monster to start. And that's on page 208 in your reading book. Clyde Monster was written by Robert Crow and illustrated by Kay Chireo. It's a fantasy. A fantasy is a make-believe story that could not happen in the real world. And I think we know that just by the title because we don't have monsters in the real world. And our focus question is, what fears have you tried to get over and how did you do it? Clyde wasn't very old, but he was growing uglier every day. He lived in a large forest with his parents. Father Monster was a big, big monster and very ugly, which was good. Friends and family usually made fun of a pretty monster. Mother Monster was even uglier and greatly admired. All in all, they were a picture family as monsters go. Clyde lived in a cave. That is, he was supposed to live in a cave. At night, anyway. During the day, he played in the forest, doing typical monster things, like breathing fire at the lake to make the steam rise. He also did typical Clyde things, like turning somersaults that made large holes in the ground and generally bumping into things. He was more clumsy than the average monster. At night, Clyde was supposed to go to his cave and sleep. That's when the trouble started. He refused to go to his cave. "Why?" asked his mother. "Why won't you go to your cave?" "Because," answered Clyde, "I'm afraid of the dark." "Afraid?" snorted his father until his nose burned. "A monster mine afraid? What are you afraid of?" "People," said Clyde. "I'm afraid there are people in there who will get me." "That's silly," said his father. "Come, I'll show you." He breathed a huge burst of fire that lit up the cave. "There, did you see any people?" "No," answered Clyde, "but they may be hiding under a rock, and they'll jump out and get me after I'm asleep." "That's silly," pointed out his mother with her pointed tongue. "There are no people here. Besides, if there were, they wouldn't hurt you." "They wouldn't?" asked Clyde. "No," said his mother. "Would you hide in the dark under a bed or in a closet to scare a human boy or girl?" "Of course not!" exclaimed Clyde, upset that his mother would even think of such a thing. "Well, people won't hide and scare you either. A long time ago, monsters and people made a deal," explained his father. "Monsters don't scare people, and people don't scare monsters." "Are you sure?" Clyde asked. "Absolutely," said his mother. "Do you know of a monster who was ever frightened by a people?" "No," answered Clyde after some thought. Oops. "Do you know of any boys or girls who were ever frightened by a monster?" "No," he answered quickly. "There," said his mother. "Now off to bed. And no more nonsense about being scared by people," ordered his father. "Okay," said Clyde as he stumbled into the cave. "But could you leave the rock open? Just a little." Okay. Now we're going to read the story about the mice in council. It's one of Aesop's fables, retold by Maria Vasquez and illustrated by Jean Beretta. And we've talked about before, a fable is a short story that teaches you a lesson. And the focus question is, why would a mouse want to stay away from a cat? Once a family of mice lived in a hole in a wall. Usually their days were filled with fun. Sometimes, though, things were not fun. At times the cat would appear. It was large and fierce. What a scary sight she was to the poor mice. The mice would have to run from the cat's sharp claws. The mice called a meeting to suggest ways to stay safe from the cat. Several suggestions were discussed. Finally, a clever mouse yelled, "I think I have it! We can use a bell! We can hang it around the neck of the cat. The sound of the bell will warn us when she's coming near. Then we will have time to run and hide." The mice squealed loudly. They all agreed upon the idea with excitement. Then a wise mouse stood up and said, "This is a great idea, but there is one flaw. May I ask which one of us is brave enough to put the bell around the neck of the cat?" And that's the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed the stories. I hope you have fun reading them, and we'll see you soon.